So today we're going to start the show a little different. A few days ago, we lost someone who was a friend, part of my family, and a mentor to me in many, many ways. His name is Chris Lips. Y'all know him as the creator and the voice of the Unseen Paranormal's theme song. I first met Chris as a teenager when he became part of my family, and he helped me realize my dream of learning audio engineering and helped foster an appreciation and love for music and audio that I still have this day. Chris was an amazing musical and creative talent. He was an amazing friend in person. His music means a lot to many of us, and he'll be greatly missed by his friends, family, and loved ones. So in honor of Chris, we're going to start the show off today with a full song that he has graciously allowed me to use over the past few years as my theme song. So I give you Guarded Light by Chris Lips. Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. Thank you for joining us. On this episode, we welcome investigators and host of Tales from the Dark podcast, Bob and Brittani. We're going to chat about their experiences in the paranormal and get some of their thoughts on the subject as well. You can find Tales from the Dark podcast on your favorite podcast app and on social media. Be sure to check out their YouTube page for awesome videos with topics ranging from cryptids to conspiracies. While you're there, make sure you hit that subscribe button and like on those videos. For more information, head over to talesfromthedark.net, and all the links will be in the show notes per usual. Hey, Bob. Hey, Brittany. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you, Eric.
Yeah, I had a fun conversation with y'all for your show that is out now. I always pre-record, so this episode won't be out for like a month. But yeah, we had a good time chatting on y'all show.
Yes, sir. I really enjoyed it. It was very nice to talk about the historical places that you go to that we don't always frequent that often.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I've been a history buff, and I think the paranormal and history kind of go hand in hand. And so to be able to connect with that history is just awesome.
Absolutely.
So I always like I was explaining to y'all before we started recording, I always like to get the origin stories because I find them interesting because everybody has different ones. So we'll start with Brittany. How did you get into the paranormal and even interested in the paranormal to do the podcast and investigate and all that stuff?
It happened in a very synchronistic way, I would say. I grew up in a small town in Western North Carolina. So growing up, I grew up around superstitions, Southern Baptist home. But my guardian at the time was actually pretty interested in like Stephen King, ghost adventures, things like that as I was getting older. So I did watch quite a few ghost hunting shows with her, but I never really took that much to heart. And I never really did any investigations until after I moved to Ohio and met Bob. And basically our journey in the paranormal together started, 3 years now?
Yeah.
3 years ago? And Bob came to me with this crazy, crazy idea to go basically hunt down a telephone, a payphone in Detroit, because it had a really weird history. And then that started our journey with Futel. And then 2 weeks after that, we finally watched Hellier, which his coworker, fellow investigator, really, Tyler, he was trying to convince Bob and me to watch it for months on end. And we finally did. And then that just brought us to Kentucky, and the rest is history.
Yeah, Hellier, I love the synchronicities, especially with the paranormal, like you were saying before. And Hellier is one of those rabbit holes that I've gone down quite a few times and kind of seeking out anything to do with that part of Kentucky. But Bob, how did you get into the paranormal? Because you've been doing it about as long as I have, for like 20-something years.
Yeah, so I got started when I was really young. I came up during the TAPS era, the OG Roto-Rooter days of, ghost hunters. And I've always kind of had an interest in, the macabre. I think I was a musician, for my entire life, played in bands up until I was 18, and kind of gravitated towards the more solemn, emo type of music, you would say. And I think there was just some kind of a fascination with death that always gripped me. And having the opportunity to go to these places and try and, contact that history, contact the other side, if you will, always, kind of struck a chord with me. So I started investigating really young, and similar to how we spoke on our show, breaking into places, knocking on neighbors' doors, and hey, is your house haunted? Can we come in, please?
Allegedly.
Yeah, just being those, being that weirdo as a kid, and then it just kind of blossomed as I got older. Then I kind of put it on the back burner, and then like Brittany said a couple of years ago, I was floating around the idea of starting a YouTube channel. I had done some Twitch streaming and done the video game streaming for a while, but I always kind of had that, like something was missing. I always kind of missed the paranormal, missed the high strangeness from my life. And then, like Brittany just said, I discovered this weird thing on Reddit, the Futel payphones, and then that kind of blossomed into Tales from the Dark as it is today. And we got on a good friend of our podcast, Nick Alexander, his podcast, Bro Ohio. He had us on, and then the show just exploded from there, and it's just been nonstop growth. And we actually have a documentary we're working on right now that's going to be coming out in probably early January of this coming year.
Yeah, that's awesome. And y'all do, your YouTube page is a bit different than your podcast, to whereas like for me, I just put up, the audio for my show and the infographic, but y'all actually do separate videos. And they're little documentaries, which I think is pretty cool, covering all kind of topics, like I said, from cryptids to conspiracy theories. I kind of tend to stay away from conspiracy theories myself, but I like y'all show because it is such a range of topics, kind of diving into all the kind of high strangeness and things. So what is some of y'all's favorite topics to discuss? Because y'all mentioned Hellier and the payphones, but what's kind of your favorite rabbit holes to dive down?
Well, I'd say for me, it's oddly become UFOs as of late. I was a paranormal guy, never really had a big interest in ufology until a couple of years ago. But what I've really enjoyed, we have a series called United Strangeness of America. And basically, what that episode is we cover a cryptid story, a paranormal story, and a UFO story. And we're doing all 50 states, and we're trying to link these topics and stories together. Because one thing that, going back to Hellier, that we noticed, a lot of these stories seem to pop up time and time again all across the country. And what I found in ufology is the same thing that'll happen in Washington State will happen in Nebraska 2 weeks before, and then a month later they're happening in New Mexico. And it's happening in such small rural towns, and especially back in these 60s and 70s, news didn't travel the same way it does now. So this kind of stuff was happening all over the place, the same sort of crafts, yet no one was connecting the dots. So for me, ufology has been a very interesting journey, because it's kind of like the paranormal for me in the early days, where I was just soaking up every bit of information and knowledge I could. I'm now doing the same thing with ufology.
Yeah, and a lot of people think ufology started with Roswell, and it really didn't. It goes way, way back. I mean, as long as humans have been around. But for a lot of people that aren't in the paranormal world like we are and don't go down these rabbit holes, they think, oh, Roswell is what started that. No, Roswell started the major cover-ups.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what about you, Brittany? What's kind of your favorite rabbit holes to go down?
My favorite rabbit hole, one that I always find myself going back into, is just all the high strangeness, especially in Eastern Kentucky. And we have made countless trips down there. And the journey really did start with Hellier. And we made what we call our cryptid pilgrimage, where we went to Point Pleasant to see Mothman and the Mothman statue for the first time ever. This was 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And then we made a journey down to Parkersburg for the injured cold. We stopped on the side of the highway. Would not recommend. You'll probably get pulled over. But stopped on the side of the highway to kind of just experience that area, see if there was anything kind of lingering. And then we made our way down to Hellier. And Hellier is definitely not what it would seem on the surface. We actually met quite a few nice people down there in that part of the country that we constantly go back and talk to. And they actually have a really good burger at that gas station that they film at.
Yeah.
We always make sure we stop by and grab a burger. But Eastern Kentucky is just filled with tragedy, but also such incredible experiences, whether that be going into Portal 31 and going into the mine shaft, going on top of the mountain and calling out to whatever, using the spirit box. It's always something that we always go back to.
Yeah. And going back to those synchronicities and kind of everything is connected in the paranormal and high strangeness worlds. And I'm of that opinion. I know we talked about that a little bit on your show, and it just, I don't know how yet, and nobody can explain how, but once you dive into all the stuff, it all makes sense that it's somehow connected, like the Hellier stuff. Have y'all seen a documentary called Dark Holler?
It's actually really a weird synchronicity. You just brought that up. So Tyler was talking about, he showed that to me last week. And it's on my to watch list now. I got that and the David Paulides Missing 411 UFO connection. Those are the two on my watch list right now. And it's kind of funny. I have talked to the gentleman who filmed all the Dark Holler series and had no idea who he was or that he had a similar YouTube series. So it's really interesting that you brought that up.
Yeah, I've had Ward Heine, the director and creator, on the show here before it came out, and then I got to watch it, and that it starts off in a certain way, but then the synchronicities, because it takes place in Eastern Kentucky as well, and the synchronicities, it kind of goes down some of the same holes as Hellier, of connecting all these dots and all these weird things. But great documentary series, you should definitely check it out. And I've got the David Paulides UFO connection on my watch list too. I haven't got to watch that just yet. But you're also into the Missing 411 stuff, because you do stuff for the Missing Persons and Mystery channel, don't you, Bob?
Yeah, so I'm the full-time editor for those guys. And I started doing some fill-in narration for them over the past month. I think I've done 4 videos for them so far that are out, and there's a couple more coming out this week. So yeah, it's kind of interesting. The Missing 411 stuff kind of kept popping up, and it was always weird because I actually didn't know what it was until this year. I had because you would see the comments on Missing Persons and Mysteries pretty consistently, and I'm like, what is Missing 411? I always thought it was just a term for missing people in national parks. I had no idea the lengths that David had gone, as an author to connect these, and that he had a whole criteria. So yeah, it's definitely one of those things where I don't recommend the missing 411 phenomenon lightly to anybody, because it's a rabbit hole that will grasp you like no other, and you're not going to get yourself back for a couple of days.
Yeah, yeah. What are your thoughts on the missing 411 stuff? Me personally, I think there's a lot of different explanations, a lot of different paranormal explanations, plus, the human element. But what are your thoughts? Because with narrating videos and doing their editing, you kind of hear all the stories. So what do you think about the missing 411 stuff?
Now, admittedly, I'm kind of a cynical person when it comes to a lot of these cases, because Brittany and I travel all over the country. We go to a bunch of national parks, and I think a lot of the cases, and now I say a lot, definitely not all. There's definitely a paranormal connection. There is something happening in our national parks, but I think a lot of it is people go on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube. They see the reels of these people doing urban camping, and they're like, "Oh, this looks awesome. I want to try my hand at this," and they go in underprepared, and the next thing you know, they're lost in the woods for 4 days. But it's when, to me, missing 411 has two sides. You have the human element can explain it away, and then you have the there is no explanation side. Like in missing 411, the hunted, I reference this all the time. There was a hunter in the New York State. The guy was a U.S. Army Ranger. He worked for the Forestry Service. He actually was like a hunting.
He was the teacher.
Yeah, he taught the local youth how to hunt in the very woods that he allegedly went missing without a trace. And I've known several U.S. Army Rangers in my day. They don't just go missing. It's a choice when they go missing.
Right.
And to hear his story and to see his family's reaction and then the community outcry, that was eye-opening. And it's always rough with the missing 411 cases, because anytime that there's a national park occurrence, somebody wants to instantly lap it into missing 411. And unfortunately, that's not always the case. But I do think there is definitely something happening in our national parks. And I think I don't want to go as far as say the government made them on purpose or any of those kind of crazy conspiracy theories. But I do think that there are things happening in the undisturbed land, which there's not much of it left here in the continental U.S. But I think when you get into places like Rocky Mountain National Park, where there's miles and miles and miles of undisturbed land that was the same it was 200 years ago, I think that there is something special about that land, and there are things that occur there that don't occur in, say, Los Angeles or any other major metropolitan area.
Yeah, yeah, and it seems that a lot of this strange phenomena are in those pockets. Like you're saying, we have like the Rocky Mountains, you have like the West Coast out there where there, 60,000 miles of Pacific Northwest forest that, has never been touched or explored. You have even in East Tennessee where I live in Middle Tennessee, but in East Tennessee, you have Smoky Mountain National Park, which is the most visited national park in the country. And there's so many of those places, even though it's the most visited, it doesn't mean it's necessarily the most explored. And there's still, strange places. And of course, Steve Stockton tells all kinds of stories because he's from out there. But there's these weird places. And you can even go into like the Bridgewater Triangle or Skinwalker Ranch, the Uintah Basin. And there's just some places that just have that. Like you're saying, it's just strange and weird things happen.
Oh, absolutely. So I'm going to kind of let Brittany tell the story. We were actually just at Skinwalker Ranch in September, and we made a trip out. Well, we made the trip to Mount Shasta. So we drove from Ohio to Mount Shasta to Las Vegas and then back all within 10, 11 days. It was a very rough trip, but I'm going to let Brittany kind of tell the story of us at the Uintah Basin, because it's one of those things where that's another place where I thought it was all hype. I thought we were going to get there and it was going to be more of a tourist attraction, but I was definitely I was wrong.
It was so weird. So we pull up to the this gas station right outside of the farm area where I would say the Skinwalker Ranch was, and we pull up to get gas, and we just kind of wanted to take a breather because Bob had been up all night, and this was what, 1 o'clock in the morning?
Yeah,
maybe midnight. So we drove all the way from Denver, Colorado through the Uintah Basin, through really terrifying roads on top of the Colorado Rockies, because I grew up in the mountains, and I grew up in the Appalachian Mountains. But being on top of a 14,000 it was something completely different than what I had experienced.
Yeah.
So I was terrified, so I slept. So he drove most of the way, saw some weird stuff out in the woods, but it was dark. And so we get to this gas station, Bob goes inside, and this girl is watching a live stream on her phone. And I don't know how they really struck up the conversation, because I stayed out in the car because I was like, listen, I'm still waking up.
Well, I always ask the same questions. Are you from the area, and have you ever seen anything that you would consider weird around here?
Yeah.
And, she had this giant, like, Endrid cold smile. She's like, I'm actually watching my buddy UFO hunting out at Skinwalker Ranch right now. And I was like, tell me all about this.
So again, don't recommend doing some of the crazy stuff we do, but so basically she said, okay, he's in this, what'd she say, red Jeep?
Yeah.
He's in this red Jeep. I'll text him and let him know that I'm sending you out there. What are you driving? And so he told her what the rental car was. And she's like, yeah, you got to go now before he stops. And she said she showed Bob the live stream, and he was seeing something in the sky. He was actively tracking it, but it was farther away. So we just put Skinwalker Ranch into the GPS, and we head over there. It was about a 10-minute drive. And when we first pulled up, the houses on the road that Skinwalker Ranch, the entrance sits on, or at least one of them, some of them were inhabited, but some of them were just really like dead almost. It wasn't like they were in disarray, but they just didn't have anyone or any sign of life near them. So we keep driving back, and there was this dog that comes out. We're almost to the gate at this point. I'd say about 400 feet away from the gate. There's this dog that comes out from the left-hand side and starts barking at us and losing its absolute mind and starts trying to bite at the tires. And Bob didn't really know how to react in that situation, but growing up where I did, my uncle actually used to have a dog like that, and he tried to bite the tires out of the motorcycle or the car. So you have to maintain your speed and just keep going. So we get to the entrance, and it is covered in cameras. It has a huge sign that says, do not enter, you will be arrested, you will be prosecuted. And it's like 1 o'clock in the morning, and we're like, all right, this is kind of nuts. The infrared on it. And so we turn around, and we're like, okay, we're just going to stay outside this area and see what we can experience. We turn back around, the dog's gone. Like, I mean, gone. We don't see a trace of him. He's not in the yard anymore. He's not up at the hill on the right-hand side. We didn't see him. So we go back up the road. We park. We get out for a minute. And we're seeing kind of like some shooting star-esque stuff across the sky. But again, far away. It's well past the atmosphere. And then we were like, okay, let's drive back and see if we see that dog again. We go back and we see 2 dogs this time. Same deal, barking, chasing, trying to bite the tires off the car. We circle back around, we come back out, we don't see them. So we stop again, and we're like, that's weird, where are they? And then all of a sudden, Bob, I get in the car because I get it like a weird feeling. I'm like, I'm going to sit down. Bob hightails it around the back of the car and jumps in the driver's seat and was like, we got to go. And all of a sudden we hear the dogs losing it. He heard something barreling down on the right-hand side down the hill, like coming right at the car. But the dogs were on the road coming back. Like we could see them from where we just came from. And at a complete 90-degree angle, something was barreling down the hill. So we hightailed it out of there and completely left. So we circled back around and went back out to the red light by the gas station, and that was about 2 miles away, and we still heard the dogs.
Yeah, well, we stopped, and I was like, I wonder, because in that part of the country, you're not supposed to use the word skinwalker.
No, you're not supposed to use it.
Yeah, so I jokingly had the window down, and I said, I wonder if that was a skinwalker that we heard, and then all of a sudden, the dogs come out of nowhere. And again, like Brittany said, we were 2 miles away at this point, easy.
Yeah, and it was the same cadence. I didn't personally see them, but it was the same cadence, and they were gaining on us. And I was like, get us out of here. We honestly thought about staying in a hotel because we were tired. I told him there's no way we're staying. We need to leave. So that was a crazy, crazy experience.
Yeah. And to go to the gate at Skinwalker Ranch, that's pretty cool because that's like next to Area 51. It's like one of those places everybody wants to go.
Yeah, we actually went there too. On the same trip we went to it's very
we were just asking for trouble. Let's be how many black cars can we get following us on the way home?
Right.
But before all that happened with the dogs, we actually circled around the whole perimeter because we thought, okay, maybe there's another entrance, there's another side road. And once we got to the other side of this area, it's really not that big. Like the area of Skinwalker Ranch, I thought it'd be miles and miles of, uncovered acreage. that all this weird stuff was happening. No, it's pretty dang small. Like I'd say, what, 5 miles square?
Yeah, give or take. And yeah, you're right. I mean, that was something that I didn't anticipate because the TV shows and even the movies that Jeremy Corbell did, it makes it seem like this is a massive area. But when you realize how condensed this is in combination with everything else that was occurring, you kind of get a completely different
perspective.
Yeah, perspective and respect for the place and respect for the homeowners with what they were going through on such a small ranch.
When we were on the other side, there was another gate on the other side that we went by. We could see the light from the like main recorded entrance. We could see the light from there shining through the trees. Like that's how little of a distance it was between gate to gate. On the other side, though, we there was a camera in a mailbox and a sign that said, "Do not stop. Do not take any pictures." And I was like, well, listen, I'm at Skinwalker Ranch. I probably already did something to get you guys to follow me. I'm taking this picture.
Right.
Luckily, no one followed us out.
Yeah, especially on the TV show and stuff and the documentary, like, you know, they're flying around in helicopters and airplanes and things. And yeah, it just seems like it's this massive area because the way they cut it on TV from the helicopter, it looks like they've been flying around for hours, but maybe they're only flying for 10 minutes.
Yeah, it was crazy. I mean, it's definitely not like the smallest piece of land I've ever seen, but it's not acreage on acreage on acreage.
Yeah, especially when you think of a ranch. I mean, ranches, you know, yeah, somewhere like Texas or even here in Tennessee, you know, thousands of acres.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was expecting, honestly. Maybe not thousands, but I've seen some pretty big ranches, especially up by Purchase Knob, that big one. But yeah, it was very small comparatively.
And like I said, I don't get too much into conspiracy theories, but what are some of y'all's favorite conspiracy theories? I've heard so many, and there's so many connected with the paranormal and so many not connected to the paranormal.
Oof. So we have a series called called For Legal Reasons, This Is All a Joke. And what we do in that series is find the most ridiculous conspiracy theories that we possibly can. And then we argue them back and forth. So Brittany will have all of a list, and we'll try and, you know, use a point system to see who can come up with the most ridiculous conspiracy theory that also makes sense. I think my absolute favorite is the most ridiculous one, which is that the Israeli war sharks. I've got my absolute favorite. I don't know if you're familiar, and I'm going to botch the actual story, but I believe it was the Egyptian government is convinced that Israel is using war sharks to spy on their government.
Yeah, I think there was some kind of psychic power in there too, like manipulating their emotions.
Yeah, it's all pretty ridiculous. I think the other, it's kind of, you kind of have to put them all into one big ball, but any of the remote viewing stuff that the U.S. military, the PSYOPs operations of the 60s and 70s, those are my other favorites because I remember being in high school, people were discussing it and everyone said, this isn't real. The U.S. Army would never have a band of hippies that are trying to do psychic experiments and read people's minds. That's ridiculous. And then to find out at 30, like, oh no, not only did this happen,
there's legal documents.
Yeah.
From it.
Yeah, but it completely ties in with, you know, these other 15 major projects the government was doing. So I think those two are probably tied for my favorite.
Yeah, and I remember listening about the remote viewing stuff on Art Bell. Back in the day, I used to go on the paper route with one of my friends. He delivered papers at night. So we would go ride with him, just give him company, and we would listen to Coast to Coast. And there was a guy that was part of that program. And that's the first time I ever heard about the remote viewing stuff with our government. And it, supposedly, you know, during the Cold War, it was the U.S. and the Russia both were trying to remote view each other to find out secrets and stuff. And yeah, and that movie, Men Who Stare at Ghosts, that was about that program, kind of a spoof on that.
Yeah, it's definitely, it's the problem that I have with conspiracy theories is they're too much fun. You find yourself getting lost very quickly, and then time and time again, I'll find myself being like, you know, this sounds dumb enough that I believe it. Hang on a second, and then you start connecting dots with other conspiracy theories, and it's one of those things that we have to be very careful on Tales from the Dark with conspiracy theories because unfortunately the conspiracy community is incredibly critical.
Yeah.
So they are relentless. So if they think that you're on to something, They will spam every social media you have. They will send you 100 emails. They will find your Skype and send you messages. Like it can get pretty rough pretty quick with the conspiracy crowd. So we try and
limit our consumption.
Yeah, we just pepper them in whenever we feel it's tasteful.
Yeah. Brittany, do you have a favorite?
Honestly, I can't say I do. I can tell you what my least favorite one is as of recently, which is we didn't go to the moon. That entire episode had me so mad.
Yeah, we had been getting requests for the past, I don't know, 2 years on a moon landing hoax episode. And I didn't want to do it because where I'm from Sydney, Ohio. 15 minutes north is where Neil Armstrong is from, Wapakoneta, Ohio. So the moon landing is like incredibly close to my heart. I'm from Ohio. A ton of astronauts are from the state of Ohio. So I always just like, this is ridiculous. I can't bring myself to discuss this. And unfortunately, Brittany's obsessed with space and NASA. So I
have been for years.
Yeah. So I couldn't ask her to be like, hey, I need you to be the conspiracy crazy person and get all this information ready. And so we did the full episode. We had a handful of folks who were just like, hey, this is phenomenal stuff. I didn't know about this. Are you sure this is real? I'm like, no, it's not real.
Please stop.
At the top of the episode, I said, this is all a joke. Don't take this serious. But, you know as well as I do, you can only say so much.
Right.
When it comes to podcasting, and someone's always going to take something you're saying a little too seriously.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the one that drives me absolutely crazy is the flat earthers.
Oh, yeah, that one too. We won't touch that one.
Yeah.
I'll ruin their whole careers.
Yeah, there's a handful we won't touch. And I go back to the Netflix documentary that the flat earthers paid for. They proved that the earth wasn't flat. They're like, huh.
It's still flat.
It's still flat, though.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Then the doc just ends.
Yeah, one of my good friends, his brother is a flat earther, and we got into argument on vacation, actually, that we went on this year. And I was like, the only thing I said to him, and I just had to walk away, was, okay, so there's been a mass conspiracy for 1,000 years, and it's just a giant cover up that the earth is actually flat. And I just walked away.
Yeah, the thing that kills me is a lot of the documentation they use from ancient history is there were theories and depictions of what people thought the world was at certain times in history before science advanced. And they at first had the Earth at the center of the solar system. They also had depictions of Earth being round, flat, and then I think it was like a eight shaped.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. And so yeah, you can't take scientific experimentation and just theories and use it as fact.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think the other one that's right now that's gaining a lot of traction is the Antarctic ice wall. The reason that one drives me so crazy is almost everyone that covers it starts with, there's a reason you can't visit Antarctica. And I'm like, what? My high school social studies teacher, Mr. Whitman, went there. I saw pictures.
Yeah.
So I know for a fact that you can go there. So if in the first 30 seconds you've already shot yourself in the foot, I can't listen to the rest of your quote unquote evidence. And it's incredibly frustrating because we get that request all the time too. Hey, you guys really need to look into the ice wall conspiracy. It's real. And it's like, we love our listeners, but there's just certain things we don't touch because of you go by the old mantra. If you can't say nothing nice, don't say nothing at all. And that's one of those I can't say anything nice about because it's so full of holes in the explanation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why I don't touch conspiracy theories. Plus, I'm a ghost guy. I'm a paranormal guy. So I just kind of stay away from that. I'll get into aliens sometimes, but it has to be the right person too, because I'm not going into like tinfoil hat conspiracy theory territory. I want somebody who's reputable and done something, wrote a book or something like that, done research and, very methodical in what they've done. The same with cryptids, talking about cryptids and things, because as in the cryptid community, they call it woo, I guess, which is their term they've come up with. If the people that believe in the supernatural, cryptid as opposed to the physical cryptid. But yeah, I try not to get in the weeds too much.
Yeah, but it can be tough, especially when you start to read, your authors like John Keel, or you pick up an Alan Greenfield book and you're just like, well, this all kind of makes a little bit too much sense that it's not connected. And that's something that we have been dealing with and really exploring over the past couple of years is just those window area connections where if you have one, you have two more, and you kind of can't avoid it at some points.
Yeah, yeah. And another thing I try to stay away from, and I've had a few on the show, is I try to stay away from psychics because they're so controversial. And, it's hard to say if somebody's really a medium or not, or a psychic or not. And so, yeah, you just kind of get the weeds with that type stuff too.
So you probably grew up with like Psychic Cleo and stuff, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, she is the sole reason I won't touch. I don't have psychics on the show. I can't bring myself to be like, all right, tell me about the thing that I don't believe in.
Yeah.
And then continue to tell me and then try and convince me, let's test it. And then I'm going to prove, then when it's proved wrong, you're going to get upset about it. Like that's what always frustrates me the most, but it's also difficult because like I believe in tarot readings and I believe in magic, but I can't bring myself to believe in these quote unquote latent psychic abilities that some people claim to have when they're monetarily driven. Because I do believe that you can remote view. I think that is a thing that is possible. I think that it's possible to have images dropped into your brain, memories that you don't have, that your brain has filled in the gaps. I think all of that's entirely possible. But the second that someone's like, okay, well, I'm going to charge you $250 an hour for a psychic reading or something, I'm going to have to call you out and say, no, I don't believe you. And here's your chance to prove it. Oh, you won't come on the show to prove it because you can't. And then you get frustrated. Then everyone's frustrated. So I agree. We also kind of avoid psychics and mediums and things of that nature.
Yeah, the few that I've had on the show were more to the medium side of actually, and also 2 out of the 3 were investigators, paranormal investigators too. And so the medium part just kind of complemented their investigation, and they were more investigators at heart. You know what I'm saying? Like they were serious investigators, and the medium side kind of took a backseat to actual investigation.
It was a tool, not a crutch.
Right. And I actually took one show down after putting it up because it's the only show that I've ever posted and then took down out of 113 episodes. So that would have been 114 with that episode because I don't know. I thought about it after I posted it, and it was in season 1 when I was still learning too. And I didn't get along with the guy. He didn't get along with me, and he was more of a motivational speaker than a psychic. And so he was one of those, like you were talking about, that discovered this latent psychic ability when he was in his 40s. And it just seemed like he discovered that ability because he figured out he can make money off people. And so,
yeah. See, unfortunately, that type of skill, like I will say that is a skill to be able to weed out those types of people and be able to understand someone's intention. That type of skill has to carry over throughout any part of your investigation, whether you're investigating paranormal, cryptid, UFO, your own high strangeness. You have to be able to understand what someone's possible motivation could be for either helping you or, giving you this kind of information, because it can get very hairy very fast. But yeah, it's a crazy world out there. That'll say that.
Yeah. So y'all investigate as well. So do y'all have a team you investigate with, or is it just the 2 of you, or what?
So we have a ragtag bunch of misfits that help us out.
Literally.
So it's kind of funny. So one of the guys that I got into investigating with all those years ago, Tyler Terry, it's actually, again, it's a weird synchronicity the way that it all happened. We grew up playing music together, playing at local shows together, went to the same high school. He's a couple years older than I am. We did some investigations in high school, which, 10, 15 years ago at this point. And we always kind of ran in the same circle, but weren't ever super close. Well, a couple years ago, I get an application at my job, and I was the hiring manager. And I'm like, Tyler Terry, this name sounds crazy familiar. And I bring him in for an interview. Turns out, yep, this is the kid that I knew, 15 years ago. He's still a paranormal investigator. We hired him, been a great employee, and we just got to talking. He kept pushing Hellier on us, and then that started us on this journey. So we do a lot with Tyler Terry, and he's an extremely talented filmmaker. And that's actually who is helped film and edit our documentary that's about to come out. So we got with Tyler Terry, and then funnily enough, a guy I was in a band with 10 years ago, Austin Lawrence, who's also the author of the Taylor Mill Horror. This guy, I don't use the term haunted ever. If anyone in the world is haunted, it's Austin Lawrence. This guy, once a week will text me, hey, Bob, I just saw a shadow person and I got choked out in my sleep. What are your thoughts? I'm like, I think the move.
He's not exaggerating. Yeah. And not only that, but when Austin's on investigations with us, I swear he is either teleporting or he needs to wear a cat bell.
Yeah.
Because he will sneak up on us in the strangest of ways. Austin, you were just across that hallway. He might even be a ghost himself. I'm not even entirely convinced.
Well, kind of going back to what I was saying about him being haunted. So, I've been doing this forever. And I've had some weird things happen on occasion. And I mean on occasion, over 2 decades on occasion. Austin Lawrence gets involved in the 2 investigations we've done. One is the documentary, and then one was Prospect Place here in Ohio. I had more paranormal evidence than I have in my entire career. And you're talking to him afterwards, and I'm like, well, why are you disappointed? He goes, oh, well, we didn't get the apparition sword fighting in the foyer, so it really wasn't a good investigation. I'm like, what are you talking about? This is insanity. He goes, oh, no, this place gets way crazier. And I'm like, how? How does it get crazier than what just happened? And so we have Austin Lawrence, and we have Nathan Barnes, who runs Terror Barn Promotions, and he is another one of those guys who he lives and breathes the paranormal. And him and Tyler are film partners. They do a bunch of stuff together. So we all kind of got together and did this joint operation for this documentary coming out that, not to toot our own horn here, and it should, depending on when this episode goes up, it might already be out. But we caught what I would consider to be, and again, of course I'm going to say this, but some of the most convincing paranormal evidence I've ever seen, and definitely the most convincing that I've been a part of. I mean, to this day, we're still scratching our head, and we're like, there had to be something. There had to be some trick. There had to be something. Something had to have happened, because there's no way we caught this on camera.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome, though. I'll definitely look forward to seeing the documentary. I'm one of those people that kind of eats, sleeps, and breathes the paranormal, and constantly digesting paranormal stuff. My palate cleanser is true crime, actually, which is weird.
Yeah, see, my palate cleanser is little kids falling down on YouTube. Whenever things get too sad or too serious, I'm like, just go to Fail Army, find the ones of people being falling down, and that's what I go to. But to kind of answer your question, so we do have that group, but then Brittany and I investigate a lot of stuff solo. I mean, we've done the mile and a half underground in a cave by ourselves before. We go to we've been to Somerset, Kentucky on our own. We've been all over Eastern Kentucky by ourselves. We don't necessarily have a team that we have to be with for an investigation to happen. And I think that's kind of what sets us apart from a lot of investigators. Is there's times where, like a great example, we were talking to a gentleman in connection to the Mothman case and the Injured Cold case. He posts a picture at like 5 p.m. I send him a message saying, hey, you're saying this is Injured Cold's house? He goes, yep, absolutely. And I said, give me the address. Within an hour, we're packed up in the car. We're on our way outside of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, to go to where Injured Cold's house allegedly was.
We get there by, 8, 9?
Yeah. And it's one of those things where we definitely rely on each other a lot when it comes to the high strangeness, because you don't always have the luxury of a long time window. And one of our biggest frustrations with a lot of paranormal groups is they'll get a call, and then 6 months later they go investigate. And I understand that sometimes the logistics don't make sense, but thankfully we don't have children. We're extremely blessed to be in a position where financially we can just up and go whenever something crazy happens.
Right. Yeah, I wish my husband was into the paranormal. He's not. So I would be doing things like that for sure. We had a vacation to St. Augustine, and I planned it kind of around the podcast and got to do some cool stuff because of the podcast. But yeah, he didn't want no part of it. He's like, I'll sit at the house and play video games or get in the pool. So.
See, I don't think Bobby ever expected me to go along with this ride.
Well, kind of going back to what we talked about at the top of the show, it was a stretch when I'm like, hey, so I've got this story about some payphones, and then I was expecting Brittany to be like, shut up. Nope. You're not spending the money. You're not buying this camera. We're not. So I'm just like, okay, now hear me out. We have to get a police escort. And at that point, I'm like, she's going to say no.
He's not joking, by the way. We literally had to have a police escort to not get mugged and or kidnapped to go see this payphone.
Yeah. When we reached out to the Detroit Police Department, they're like, yeah, don't go there. We'll meet you there at 7:30 in the morning because that's the safest time for you guys to be there. Don't go there alone ever. And I was like, what? This is like the media contact for the police. She's like, that's not a safe place for you guys to be.
It's literally on one of the worst streets in Detroit. I'm not kidding. It's on like a list.
So it's one of those things where I definitely lucked out getting someone who's as adventurous as I am, because anyone else, I think if I brought up a payphone story, they're like, that's dumb. We're not going to Detroit, Michigan for a payphone.
Yeah.
We're not going to the caves in Eastern Kentucky. What are you talking about? No, let's go to the Bahamas. That's what I think most people's responses would have been. Yeah, Brittany just dove head first. Like, yep. Okay, strange noises in caves. I'm in. Let's do it.
Estes method, a mile and a half under the cave. Let's do it.
Yeah, that's awesome to travel around. I wish I could travel more. That would be one of the things I would love to do. But we have 8 dogs, so to get somebody to stay with our 8 dogs is a task in of itself.
Our cat eats like 8 dogs. Does that count? Oh man.
So what else do y'all have coming up? You said you have the documentary coming up. Any other exciting news?
Well, to kind of talk about the documentary, this has been about a year in the making, give or take. And no one really knows the backstory to it. Basically, what happened is we had Tyler came to us and said, "Hey, I want you to watch this clip." So I watched this clip, and he's like, Nathan claims he was scratched. Well, I don't believe in demons, and I get crucified for this all the time, but I don't believe in demons. And that just seemed like the most stereotypical thing that it can happen to a ghost hunter is you get scratched on the back.
Yeah.
So that happens. He shows it to me, and I'm like, I kind of believe this. Let's go to this place. And so we've been shooting we've been there a few different times, and we actually just wrapped up filming about a month ago. And it's been one heck of a ride because this location just keeps on giving. I mean, even we had to go back one final time to shoot the talking heads and kind of wrap up the rest of the film, and not even to investigate. And we have crazy things happening during our filming session. So that'll be out here soon. And then I know we're doing a lot more traveling this coming year. And I know we're going to trying to get into some of these paranormal conventions and get in front of places. Then we have some live shows that we're in the talks with right now. And then I think the other big thing that we're working on is getting back down to Portal 31 in Lynch, Kentucky, which is one of my favorite locations ever, because we kind of talked about it when you were on the show. This place is just, it's stuck in history. Like, it feels like you walk into the mine and you're walking back in time to when Kentucky was this great coal capital. And it's just such a bizarre location. And even that was a synchronicity, how we kind of linked up with. It
was insane.
Yeah,
we took a week trip to Kentucky, and we literally didn't have anything planned. We were like, okay, we like Whitesburg area. That's usually where we like to stay at. And unfortunately, Whitesburg was, hit very hard with the flooding that happened in the area. But a couple years ago, we stayed for an entire week. And we were just scouring through Facebook. We were watching videos and documentaries made in the local area. And Bob joined this caving group, who then said, you should meet Tony Filosi. But I don't know if you can meet Tony Filosi, so I'm going to ask you a few questions. It was like an interview for the mafia on
Yes, this guy reaches out and he goes, I know a guy who knows all this stuff, but I don't know that he's going to talk to you. And I'm like, is this Zach Baggins in disguise? Who is this guy? And so he gives me this like mini interview, and then we get a hold of this guy, Tony Filosi. And he gives me like 4 messages initially. It was, yep. I was like, Tony, I understand that you have some cool stories in the air. Yep. Would you be willing if we kind of just follow you around for a bit? Okay, yep. And I was like, okay, when would you like to meet? Tomorrow. Okay, where would you like to meet? Meet me at the county line. I'll be on the side of the road.
That is the most holler thing I've ever heard since I left North Carolina. Let me tell you, meet me at the county line.
Yeah.
Yes. So we get there and we follow this guy who's in a state of Kentucky state vehicle. Turns out he works for the state, and he's like, well, I'm going to take you guys to some cool places. Guys can film, you can do whatever. And he takes us to Portal 31, which is it's an abandoned mine.
In Lynch, Kentucky.
In Lynch, Kentucky. And Lynch is this, unfortunately, it's a town that's just ravished with poverty. But there's a ton of history. And every building in the town is historically significant. They have the first school that was taught by an African-American teacher is in Lynch, Kentucky. And
it was a renowned school. They received many awards for the level of education that someone could receive at Lynch, Kentucky.
Yeah, and so within 12 hours of meeting this guy, we're sitting in a mine cart.
We met the mayor.
Yeah. the mayor showed up, and he's like, oh, you guys are ghost hunters? That's awesome. I love Dan Aykroyd. I'm like, yes, thank you, sir. But yeah, like within 12 hours, we're in this mine cart traveling underground. with the curator, Nick. I can't remember Nick's last name, unfortunately.
I can't either, yeah.
And Nick does a bunch of tours and stuff, not necessarily paranormal tours, but tours of the location. You can go and learn the history of the county and coal and all that kind of stuff. But that was a bizarre ride. And I think that really is what solidified Tales from the Dark, was that trip, because we weren't sure. We were still kind of dipping our toes in and like, this is a lot of money. It's a lot of time. It's a lot of effort that you have to put into making a successful show. Do we really want to do this? And then all these things just happen in rapid succession, and the way that these things do. And yeah, the rest is kind of history. Now we have a documentary coming out. We have a couple more documentaries planned for next year, and it's just been an amazing ride over the past couple of years.
Yeah. Since I've started this 3 years ago, it's been insane. Just how it's kind of steamrolled, and like all the synchronicities and things, and also networking. That's one of my favorite things is meeting people in the paranormal and networking. Like, I mean, even meeting y'all, came through like in a roundabout way through Steve Stockton and being familiar with him, and things like that. It's just crazy how all the synchronicities happen, and yeah, it just blows my mind.
Well, yeah, and you're 100% right. The networking is amazing because, like I spoke about earlier, we were on the Bro Ohio podcast, and oddly enough, the dude Nick, one of the main hosts, he lives 10 minutes from our house. I had never heard of the podcast, and it's a major podcast. Never heard of it before. Didn't know who he was. We become pretty good friends, and I'm like, yeah, I just got back from Eastern Kentucky. Here's the stuff about the Hopkinsville Goblins. He's like, oh, I know Geraldine. I'm like,
wait, what did you just say?
I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, no, I know her very well. We had her on the show. Let me get you guys on Facebook. So we get to talking to Geraldine, and within a month, we're sitting in her kitchen at her home in Kentucky and interviewing her. And she's changing my mind about the Hopkinsville Goblin case. And then at the end, she's like, hey, do you want to see something really cool? And I'm like, not a whole lot is cooler than this, Geraldine. and her husband gets up, and I'm like, what's going on? What are we doing? Her husband's like, well, let me show you this. And we kind of follow him. They have a beautiful home with 1 million cats. It's a paradise. He takes us into this little garage area and turns the light on, and there's this 6.5 foot tall Darth Vader. And it was used on the movie set in Star Wars. And then my brain, fills in the gaps of what I'm looking at. It is an entire storeroom full of Star Wars memorabilia. And it was the most random thing I've ever encountered in my entire life. And he's pointing stuff out like, oh yeah, this was a movie prop. They actually zoomed in here for the Death Star, and I bought this. And I went across the country to pick this up. And it was just so bizarre that, a story about payphones ended up seeing a private Star Wars collection that could be in a freaking museum. Like it's crazy Insane. How fast stuff happens.
Yeah.
Yeah. What future topics you got coming up on the show?
Well, we've got we call him Uncle Alan. Alan Greenfield is going to help us end out this year. And I've got a couple theories involving his works. I'm not sure how familiar you are with Alan Greenfield, but I've got some theories based on his works that we're going to hopefully test out at the end of the year. So I'm really excited for that. Then we're going to be on Lon Strickler's show, Phantoms and Monsters, in early January. But podcast-wise, we always we're pretty random when it comes to our topics. It's whatever seems important to us that week is what we cover. And unfortunately, sometimes that means recording at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning because research gets the best of you. But I know we have some government operations that people think don't exist. We have an episode coming out about that. Then we have the Mount Shasta episode, which we've been working on since we came back from our trip. And that'll be out before the end of this year. We're going to dive into the Lumerians. We're trying to find some research and anything we can find on this group called the Oniders.
Yeah, if anyone actually listening to this would be able to help us with that research, that would be phenomenal.
Yeah.
They are very secretive, to say the least.
Yeah, we were outside of Mount Shasta, and we were at a little diner, and this woman, I'd say probably 20, 25, somewhere in there, is the bartender, and she goes, oh, are you guys familiar with the Oniders? And I'm like, what is that? I didn't know what a Lumerian was 10 minutes ago. So no, I'm not.
Who is this?
It's kind of like they're a very secret group, and they don't like being called a cult, but they're kind of like that. And they have a camping spot. And we actually passed a few different going through the national forest. They have their own sections of the national forest where only they can camp at.
Yeah, didn't she say they owned like the volcano?
Yeah,
which Mount Shasta is a volcano.
Yeah, they own part of Mount Shasta on the volcanic side that was active, I think, in the late 80s, the last time it erupted.
Yeah.
And all this stuff, and yet when you try and look them up on Google, you find nothing about this group. And it's one of those where I don't know if it's as simple as it's like a Knights of Columbus type of deal, or if it's the like the Freemasons or what, but they're a very secretive group. So we're definitely going to be researching into that and probably doing a multiple series on Mount Shasta, because that is one location that has so much to give. It's kind of impossible to cover it in just an hour and a half.
Oh yeah, there's so much. We want to talk about a strange place that with the Lumerians, and then also the strange disappearances, and then one of the famous stories about the robot grandma, the little boy that disappeared, the robot grandma. Yeah, so many stories from Mount Shasta.
The cult leader who had turned blue from burn her blood, and which the bartender told us about that too. And I was like, who are we talking about here?
Yeah, that place, I'll be looking forward to y'all's deep dive into that, because Mount Shasta is one of those places that's always intrigued me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, when we actually went to the top of Mount Shasta in the middle of the night, and there was a group there doing some sort of song and dance troupe on the top of Mount Shasta. And I've got a video of it. I can send it to you once we're done with the show here. But you can hear like Native American drums being banged and people singing and dancing. And it's it's one of those places. The closest I can actually describe it is going to Point Pleasant, West Virginia. It's got that dreamy, like something liminal play, like something here is off and you can't quite put your finger on it, but it's a special place.
Yeah, just that feeling in your being, in your core. This is a weird place.
Yeah, and actually in the middle of the town, just kind of as a side note, they have one of the biggest metaphysical stores I've ever been into, and it is amazing. They have instruments there. That was very, very cool. The lady who runs it actually is very knowledgeable, too, of the local folklore as well.
So, like I said at the top of the show, they can find more information over at talesfromthedark.net, and they can contact y'all on all the social medias as well. And everybody go check out their YouTube page. Like I said, hit the subscribe button. Check out the awesome videos over there on all different things. Thank y'all so much for coming on the show today. I really appreciate it. I enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you, Eric.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having us on. We appreciate you coming on our show. We've got a lot of positive feedback. A lot of people are like, hey, you got to have this guy on again. So be prepared the next couple of months, us reaching out again to have you back on.
I'd love to come back on. It was a lot of fun. All right. Thanks again. Everybody out there, stay safe. We'll see you next time. Have a good day.